Hi, everyone. This is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. My apologies for being a little bit late to the live stream. There were some technical difficulties, and then we had an unexpected visitor to the office and caught me right when I was just about to click broadcast. And I didn't realize that the live stream was already connected to YouTube. I thought I was just in the waiting room to initiate the live stream. So I wasn't actually aware that you guys were waiting so long. So my apologies for that. Anyway, I did want to make a video because on the back of the Miami Bitcoin conference that I attended, I could not believe the level of disinformation, FUD, and mean-spiritedness coming from a lot of maximalists in the Bitcoin community over the things that we do on the proof of stake side of the world. And to this point, I think it's become no longer possible to have a conversation with anyone in that circle. They just simply are part of a religion now. And the point of this video is to discuss a little bit about some basic stuff that seems to be completely lost and missed, and talk a little bit about stuff we're doing in the space as it relates to consensus. So as many of you are aware, the engines of cryptocurrencies, the things that get them to transform from one state to the next state to the next state, is a consensus algorithm. So what happens is you have this big decentralized mesh of nodes and connections, and transactions are occurring all the time, information's flowing all the time. You somehow have to order all of them in a meaningful way. This is a very classical problem in distributed systems, and it's something that's been discussed and thought about for well more than 40 years. So it's a very old problem, and it was not something that magically was discovered and invented by Satoshi. There were papers in the 1960s and 1970s discussing this problem. From the beginning of when computers existed, people started realizing that when computers are in different locations, perceptions of orders of events are very difficult to ascertain without designating a trusted third party to take care of that. So proof of work is just an engine that basically allows you to make decisions of who gets to decide serialization for that moment, that update of the system, that block. The heartbeat of a blockchain is a block. Every time a block comes, the heartbeat transactions get approved. Proof of work is just a type of engine. So let's talk a little bit about this. And what makes this video exciting is that we actually get to talk a little bit about where the future is going. And I think this is something that's really not discussed very much. Okay, so this right here, you all can see my nice little blackboard. Whether your proof of work, whether your proof of work or a proof of stake, you have the same three things that happen. Okay? One, you have to choose someone in charge to order everything that goes into that heartbeat, the system, the block. Two, you actually have to beat the heart, make the block. And three, the network has to accept the block. All right, proof of stake and proof of work are basically identical in steps 2 or 3, in that you can put a proof of stake system in Bitcoin and Ethereum and other such things. You're not going to actually change the ledger rules or the validation predicates or all the kinds of things that you go into accepting whether something is real or legitimate. Where they differ is here. How do you pick somebody in charge? It's done here with, and they both use different notions of resources. Let's use that term, resource. Okay. In the case of proof of work, this is based upon hashes. Okay. How many hashes per second you can do. In the case of proof of stake, this is based upon ownership of an asset. All right. So the resources differ, but the concept is basically the same. If you control 25%, let's say, of the total amount of hashes per second, the total amount of hash rate in your proof of work system, on average, 25% of the time, you're going to be selected to be in charge. Now, that's not always the case. You can sometimes 18%, sometimes 35% of the time. But on average, if you graph it out over a long enough period of time, the numbers will cluster around 25%. And it's the same for proof of stake. If you own 25% of the system, well, then on average, 25% of the time, you will be, or the people you designate your proxies, the people you delegate to, will be in charge and have the right to make blocks. All right, so the point of this video is to say, hang on a second here. This is just a resource. And guess what? You can combine these together. There was a cryptocurrency in 2011 called Purecoin. You guys remember that? Sunny thing. That was actually a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake protocol, which meant that it actually didn't have one resource, but actually had two resources. So people could mine, and they also, because of their ownership of the network, could also be selected to make a block. And there was some mechanism within Purecoin to work on that. In 2016, there was a follow-up protocol that was made by Hung Chang and Alex Cherpanoy called TwinsCoin that actually tried to improve that model. And there's still a lot of thought and work onto how do you go from one resource in this system to decide who's in charge, to two resources, to eventually n resources. Okay, so you have a blockchain. Each of these slots, you're going to make a block. There's a question mark of, well, who's the person to do that? Because there's an expectation that blocks should be made with some degree of regularity. So in Bitcoin, it's 10 minutes. In Cardano, it's roughly 15 seconds, give or take. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Synchronized. And version of Ouroboros has a different opinion on the rate that they come. But anyway, you can say, well, only one resource decides this, or two, or n, many resources decide this. So why would you want to do that? Well, every pool of resources comes with a philosophy behind it. So if you're selecting resources out of the proof of work side, then you are making assumptions about the availability of ASICs. You're making assumptions about energy cost. You're making assumptions about knowledge, domain expertise. Very easy for a person delegating Cardano. It's a virtual resource. It can move anywhere in the world. It's very hard for people to build a $200 million data center and run that data center. Okay, so there's different expectations you're making about these things. And for proof of stake, you're making the expectation that somebody actually has the ability to buy ADA, that markets exist, and that those markets are relatively decentralized. And there's always a seller or a buyer to basically get some ownership of that virtual resource. You're also making assumptions about the level of veracity, honesty, credibility of the people who control these resources. So with mining, you assume an honest majority. With a plutocratic system like a proof of stake system, you assume honest majority. And the incentives for honesty are different. So in proof of work system, the incentive for honesty is if you wreck the token, then your miners decrease in value if you can only use it on that token. In the beginning, that was true to a certain extent for ASICs and other such things built for Bitcoin. You could mine other things that were similar, but profit margins were dramatically smaller. But when you see things that use the same algorithms and the work rate is relatively the same, the price is relatively the same, you actually have perverse incentives to do what's called a gold every time. In the case of proof of stake, you own the system. So if the price dramatically decreases, you're actually taking value out of your own pocket. Excluding the existence of derivatives and short selling and other things, that seems to be a rational assumption, but it may break cases. So in the effort of resilience, the goal of going from one resource to n resources means that your system is more overall dynamic, because you're getting your security, you're getting your block production from more than one pool potentially. But but there's a really difficult question of how do you stitch these things together. And actually, it turns out that the Twins Coins paper had a few issues with it. And attempts to create hybrid proof-of-work, proof-of-stake systems is a little bit more elusive. The other thing is that your resources don't have to be connected to a computer-driven or ownership-driven model. So in many cases, you guys will hear things like proof of merit. Okay. So that's this concept of, and there's many variations of it, et cetera, et cetera. But basically the idea is that somebody does something beneficial, call him Bob, for your cryptocurrency. And the more good things that Bob does for that cryptocurrency, and we'll just put that in quotes because who the hell knows what good things are, he'll get some sort of token for that. And that token represents a resource. So identifying the good things and a fair way of distributing that is actually an ongoing research problem that's really exciting and sexy and cool. And then also, how do you make sure Bob is real versus a bot? Oh, Bob. There's your eyes. So that is it's called civil resistance. Okay. So there are other resources you guys can have. Like, for example, let's say that your blockchain is getting really, really big and really, really heavy. Sum up your blockchain, sum up this whole thing. And that equals 8 exabytes. All right, a huge amount of data is there. Well, who's going to store that? So maybe you can do proof of storage. And there's some really cool protocols, like, for example, Permacoin was one that I'm familiar with. But there are things that have come since that time. Chia is another ecosystem that's trying to figure out ways of connecting history to blockchain. But, that could be another resource. You could actually, instead of saying hash power, it could be hard drive space. Okay, so